Now I would like to welcome Victoria Volishna, a PhD candidate at the School of Human Resources Management at York University, and she will present a paper on skilled migrants, city integration, and migrant resilience. Welcome, Victoria.
Victoria, you're muted.
Sorry. Oh my God. I told the most important, information while I was muted. Sorry. So a couple of words before I start presentation. So this study was conducted with Dr. Jelena Zikic, who is my supervisor, and it's a qualitative study, and the most predominantly data has been conducted before pandemic has started. So this study does not is not about like any kind of COVID related, and mostly it's about interaction of migrants and cities. So this study about how people presenting today is about how people change cities they live in. So mainly we were concentrated on particular population of skilled migrants who come to Canada and decide permanently settle in different Canadian cities, and they come from different countries. Skilled migrants, predominantly those people who have at least bachelor degree, and they decide to restart their careers in Toronto, in Montreal and Vancouver. It depends on the city.
Victoria, you're muted again.
Victoria, you're muted.
Sorry, that's my computer. So in this study, we wanted to understand how cities as physical and geographical space might impact skilled migrants' careers and their resilience. So we were inspired by cities' differences and wanted to know how skilled migrants perceive these differences and how like their interaction with cities and physical objects, and how cities like a system of physical objects might impact migrants' resilience. So we know that majority of I will be talking about later that majority of migrants they prefer to settle in Toronto and Montreal as the main gateway cities in Canada, but they come from different cities. So for example, some of our participants, they came from Hong in 70s, and which was at that time, more complex than Toronto back then, yeah. And some of them, they came from Mumbai, like in 2000, and some of them came from Europe, and how they, like interact with the new city environment. So it was our main intention when we started this study. So as we know, Canada is the migrant receiving country, and almost 300,000 people come to Canada every year, and 30% of these people, they prefer to settle in Toronto. So Toronto is the main gateway city. It's the largest city and international financial and business center. So majority of migrants, they choose Toronto as a destination because they know that Toronto usually offers higher wages, better infrastructure, concentration. It's a concentration of various industries, better housing. So they strive to stay in Toronto and find job here and restart their careers. So it's not surprisingly, though, that migrants share multiple membership in various communities and collaborate and need to communicate with each other through various boundaries, such as language, cultural, predominantly cultural and language barriers. And when they move, for sure, they experience a sense of disorientation. They are unfamiliar with the new environment. And for sure, this physical and new, like physical environment impacts them somehow. And for sure, it impacts how they, like can reestablish and rebuild their career and how they can be resilient. So therefore, they, like face challenges of incompatibility between their new host city and old physical settings, old home cities. And for sure, they already established the previous, previous connection with their physical environment, and these connections have been discontinued when they moved to Toronto. So as a result, they need to, like being discontinuous from their previous physical environment, they need to build their new careers, and with new different rules, new rituals, new norms, and scripts, and they need to adjust somehow and understand what's around them. So in general, the research shows, the previous research shows that city and its physical objects, which is we call city artifacts, they play a great role in how migrants bounce back after these challenges they face. And the role of city and its objects and physical artifacts in the city process of building migrant resilience has not been clearly stated so far. Therefore, the purpose of this research was to explore the role of these urban settings and city artifacts and understand how these physical settings guide migrant resilience. In order to achieve the purpose of the research and answer the question how really city impacts migrants' resilience and their career, we brought theory of boundary objects. So that's a very, unusual and unfamiliar to public audience theory. Usually has not been applied before in any case to understand migrants' experience in the cities. And that's why I need to explain a little bit what are boundary objects, because usually people ask, so what are they? So boundary objects, it's a theory of boundary objects that was established by sociologists when they studied in artificial intelligence. And Susan Lee Starr is the author of this theory, and it has been widely used in usually when researchers investigate how people collaborate together inside the organization. So boundary objects are defined as material artifacts or practices that share between different communities and used between different groups. So the main function of boundary objects is they help to learn, to collaborate, interact, of people who belong to different communities, but wanted to share some kind of common experience and understand each other better. So usually they vary from concrete boundary objects to more abstract. And concrete boundary objects are newspapers, magazines, geographical maps, while abstract boundary objects is more like, for example, libraries and some common, some institutions where people come together and collaborate with each other. So the study was conducted in 2018, 2017, and 2019. So we collected interviews. It's a qualitative study, and we conducted in general 47 interviews. They all were transcribed and analyzed with elements of grounded theory. So we usually use three stages of coding. It's open coding, actual coding, and selective coding. And the result of this analysis was the model. It's a process model that was built in order to understand how actually boundary objects impact migrants' career resilience. And in general, I will be talking about briefly about each of these squares right now, and I will provide some quotes of participants. But in a nutshell, the model shows that looking for cities similarities and and differences help to establish city belongings for migrants. And as soon as they establish these belongings, they try to reestablish career and focus their interaction with boundary objects to three main strategies: object orientation, exploration, and creation. And in the end, it helps them to integrate functionally or holistically. So, so the final outcome is a career reestablishment, which could be done in 2 dimensions. So, first square is about special continuity and city belongings. So when migrants just initially come to the city, what they start doing, they start comparing visually and spatially their host city with their home city. So they compare experience and they try to compare, how the cities they live in look like and what's the difference in their new environment and new city. And migrants evaluated and compared experience of their new city, and they usually use memories of their previous cities they lived in. And as a result, they discovered, okay, I'm connected, or I'm not. If the city were really familiar, they established this connectedness very fast. While if the city was different, it took some time to establish and understand, okay, so here, for example, this, sometimes they even compare it, physical places, or they were looking for some familiar cafes, stores, or, we had an interesting participant who was a composer. And he, in order to establish connectedness to the city, he came to the University of Toronto and was, walking around conservatory when, musicians are musicians, get their education, or he went to some kind of places that he could establish and feel this connectedness with his profession, because he was a musician. So he went to Roy Thompson Hall. So he's trying to find, this physical object that connects, that he was exposed in his home city versus in, in the host city. And as soon as, they feel, okay, I found belongingness, they started this career establishment process. So first, migrants use city objects such as brochures, newspapers, and magazines to orient themselves in the city, and we name type to label this strategy as boundary object orientation. And as soon as the orientation has been done, migrants sought to use the city artifacts to translate their social capital, to search for local educational institutions, and to overcome various barriers around local boundary objects. They started to explore.
2 minutes, Victoria.
Okay. And finally, some of migrants, they were even involved in creating those artifacts, physical objects that can boost resilience of other migrants. So they created telephone, telephone books when everybody can call from a specific community, can call to each other. So usually it helps to create social connectivity and help other people to feel that they belong to the city. And I prepared a couple of quotes from our participants. I just read the one for the sake of time. So for example, when participants were involved in creation of boundary objects, they one of our participants, Henry, told us, I published the telephone directory of Bangladesh in Toronto, and I was phoning everyone and asking, anybody else from our country? This way I contacted a lot of people and I helped others to get in touch and connect. there was little communication at that time, and this helped, I think a lot to other people to communicate with each other. So in terms of outcomes, so career establishment process was done by two ways, so functional versus holistic integration. So functional integration means that people, just focus on achieving personal goals, and personal resilience versus holistic integration. They were really inclusively and externally focused, and they wanted to integrate into the society. And here is a good example of holistic integration overall, who who shared with us that she truly wanted to integrate. So I want this world to become one. I believe more and more that all world is one. I belong to Canada, but I belong to my country as well. So it's an integration between her past country and Canada. And I'm saying integration. So integration is my way of thinking. So this is how she shared with us the holistic type of integration, really to become the soul into country. It's like a genuine understanding of the country's tradition, and boundary objects help her, doing the integration. So in general, main contribution of the study is like we brought understanding of continuity and belonging to the city, which increased migrant resilience. So we try to understand the role of city artifacts in migrants' career establishment. So the desire of just self-continuity and belonging was very necessary for migrants, and artifacts, boundary objects helped them to establish this, their careers, to find them their, their past experience, to bring their past experience and successfully integrate and reduce their resilience and function. And finally, functional versus holistic integration showed how migrants interacted and learned about the physical objects, the artifacts in the context. That influence their social integration and increase their resilience. So, in a nutshell, that's the result of the study. For sure, the study's biggest, I just presented many points that we wanted to share. But our chapter is also coming, which will be a little bit late, later than planned. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Victoria. And we look forward to chatting with you more after our final presentation and our